Kate Milifalcha. Welcome to Irish Granny Helen. And today is August 7th. And if I did this right, I just put up a video about the peace bridge between the United States and Canada. And there was a little bit of snarky association between that and this next story I want to tell. You might wonder, why on earth am I talking about this? I want to talk about the Hatfields and the Mccoys. And why do I want to talk about it? Because it is actually directly linked to the halls of power today. And I will get to that eventually. If you stick around for the entire story, you will find out. So when somebody says Hatfields and Mccoys, this has become what's called a metonym. In other words, it's word or words that substitute have a different meaning entirely. So it has become a metonym for the word feud, as in calling the federal government Washington. Everybody knows what you're talking about when you say that. You say the Hatfields and Mccoys, you know you're making reference to an unbelievably complicated, protracted feud between two families. So this is an interesting story. It took a little bit to parse because it's so convoluted. So if I stumble a little bit, forgive me, because not only is there a situation here where two families are at each other's throats, they're also intermarried. So it's a little, I guess that's not that unusual. So let's talk about Hatfields and the Mccoys. The Mccoys were a family from Kentucky. They were on the Kentucky side of the Tug Fork, Little River. They were Confederates in the Civil War, except for one member of the family, Asa McCoy, who joined the Union. The head of the family was a guy, Randall McCoy, or as he was called, Old Randall McCoy. And a lot of these people have nicknames, and it's pretty hilarious. He was originally a descendant of the original landholding William McCoy. Now, this whole feud began because Asa was killed while returning home from the war. He was killed by the Logan Wildcats, which were Confederate Home Guards, kind of a militia group of the Confederate Army. In October of 1863, Asa had joined the 45th Kentucky Infantry, Union soldiers. In December, he was captured by the rebels, and he had a really bad chest gunshot wound. They released him after a couple of months to the Union Hospital. They didn't want to deal with him anymore. And so this group was part of a larger Pike County Guards, and they were responsible. This is already crazy, and we just started. They were responsible for killing Moses Christian Klein, who was friends of a guy called Devil Anse Hatfield. So we're talking now guilt by association. Anse Hatfield, Devil Anse Hatfield, vowed retaliation and took credit for the ambush of a leader of the Pike Guards. So Asa, who was shot January 7th, 1865, right by his home, 13 days after leaving the hospital, leaving the army, he was killed, and the Confederates took credit. We have a name, but we'll get to that. The person they think did it was a member of the West Virginia militia, and Hatfield. Now, the Hatfields, they were wealthier than the McCoys. They lived on the other side, the West Virginia side of the Tug Fork in Mingo County. They got their money from timber. They were very well connected politically. They had money and power and influence. Devil Ance Hatfield was the first suspect in the shooting of Asa McCoy because he had this grudge against them and for an earlier shooting. And they figured, okay, it had to be him. But it turned out there was proof he was home at the time. He wasn't anywhere near where Asa was killed. But they figured out who did it. And it was the Wildcats with one of the members of his family, who we'll name later. Okay, so now there's bad blood. Now they're not friends. They live on opposite banks. Their land is opposite banks of this small fork of the river. And it's testy. 13 years later, in 1878, they had a fight over a hog. And Floyd Hatfield was arguing with Randolph McCoy, who owns this hog. Well, they took it to the courts, and the justice of the peace was a Hatfield. Guess who won this suit? The judge ruled in Floyd's favor. Floyd Hatfield got the hog, and he made his determination based on the testimony of a guy called Bill Stanton. Stanton was related to both families. And the McCoys were mad. So even though he was related to them, and so when they say related, it can be by blood, it can be by marriage. There's so much intermingling in the past and on into the future during the feud. It's crazy. So Stanton, who was the witness against the Hatfields that lost the pig. No, oh my God. He was the witness against the McCoys, and the Hatfields got the pig. I try to keep track. I can't. So he was killed. The McCoys were mad because he testified against them in court, and Hatfields got the pig. And in 1880, the Hatfields got a kind of a blanket acquittal. It was called self-defense. So now we have romance. This is Romeo and Juliet writ large. Rosanna McCoy had a relationship with a guy, Johnson Ance. He was known as John's Ance. He was the devil's son. He was the son of Devil McCoy, Hatfield. So she left her family, the McCoys, to go live with the Hatfields in West Virginia. But then she and John split up and she went back home to the McCoys. But then, love has a way, and they wanted to get back together again. But the McCoys were not having any more of it, and they arrested Johns on charges of bootlegging. Rosanna rode in the night, all night long, to beg Ance to help Johns. But the Hatfields spirited Johns back to West Virginia. Johns, at this point, abandoned the relationship. Rosanna was pregnant. He didn't want any part of it. And he left her for her cousin, Nancy McCoy, and married her in 1881. So, anybody else have a headache at this point? I can't keep track. I don't know how these people kept track. Because theoretically, this was the Hatfields versus the McCoys. The reality is they were so intermingled, it's insanity to keep track of who's for who. In 1882, Ellison Hatfield, the brother of Ance, was killed by 3 of Rosanna's younger brothers. The 3 brothers were arrested by the Hatfields and taken to Pikeville for trial. Ance rounded up some vigilantes to recapture the 3 McCoy brothers. They went to West Virginia, and when there was a fight, and Ellis and Hatfield died. All three of the McCoys got killed. They were described as bullet-ridden. And soon, the second son of murder victim Asa, the guy leaving the war, his second son, Lark McCoy, was ambushed by Hatfields, like a West Virginia posse. So they're crossing state borders. And they're going after each other now. This has escalated. They're rounding up a posse and going over to Kentucky. And you killed my son. I'm going to kill 3 of your brothers. It's crazy. So 20 Hatfields were indicted for this whole killing thing. This particular incident with the 3 brothers. But they all eluded arrest. So the McCoys, they were mad. And they met with the deputy, Sheriff Klein, who was in their back pocket. And Ants sent gunmen to ambush Randall and his son Calvin. But mistakenly, they ended up killing Randall's nephews. And as a result, now more people in the family had a grudge against more people. Sheriff Klein, Martha McCoy's brother, reinstated the charges against the Hatfields. He announced rewards for Hatfield's arrests as revenge. He held a grudge against Ants because formerly they had a lawsuit over land, which only fueled the hatred between the family members, and they kept grudges. They would get mad and they'd stay mad, and they didn't seem to be able to let go of anything. So the 2 nephews were killed accidentally, and, accidentally on purpose. They intended to kill them. They just mistook them for the wrong people. So days after these mistaken killings of the nephews of Hatfield, acting constable Cap Hatfield broke into the house of Mary, the sister of Jeff McCoy, and flogged her because they thought she had warned the McCoys that the Hatfields were coming. Jeff McCoy was on the run already. He wasn't home. He was on the run from murder charges. He heard about the flogging of his sister, and he tried to have the guy who helped McCoy with the flogging arrested, and ended up getting shot by Cap Hatfield. The McCoys killed the accomplice later. Lark McCoy eventually was caught and killed by the Hatfield posse. So by 1888, we are at the peak of the feud. You can't imagine it could get worse. It does. New Year's Night Massacre. Yeah. The Hatfields opened fire on the cabin of a group of sleeping McCoys. The McCoys shot back, and there was a big gun battle in the yard coming out of and going into this cabin, but they set the cabin on fire. Randall McCoy got out of the cabin and hid in the pig pen, but Floyd Hatfield's hog was okay because this is the McCoy pig pen. Most of his kids did get out of the house, except for Calvin and Alifair. I love Alifair. I think it's a Welsh name. It's a Gaelic name of some brand. Alifair was killed. These are children. His wife Sarah was caught and almost beaten to death by these guys, these Hatfields. So as the cabin burned down, Randall and the rest of the family escaped into the wilderness, but they had to hide there for quite a while, so long that the children all got frostbite and were severely affected by it. The remaining McCoys moved to Pikeville to try to get out of the rural area, get into a well-populated area, surrounded by other people, to avoid the West Virginia raiding parties that were going after the isolated homes. So between 1880 and 1891, 12 people were killed. The governments of West Virginia and Kentucky threatened each other with their militia. They threatened to invade each other with their militia because of this. This is how bad this was getting. Pike County Sheriff's posse crossed into West Virginia to get the Ants group. 2 McCoys were in the posse, of course. They caught and killed the original person that they believed responsible, or the relative of the original person that they believed responsible for the murder of Asa, the original death coming home from the Civil War that kind of fueled this whole thing. It has to have been a younger generation because we're all already in the 1890s. So 25 years after the war, roughly. This posse raided Hatfield homes. They captured many Hatfields. They killed 3 of them. They cornered the rest in Grapevine Creek, January 19th. There was a gigantic battle. The Hatfields were trapped. They were caught. 8 were indicted for the death of little Alifair McCoy in the cabin fire. This went to the Supreme Court. I just cannot believe this. The Supreme Court was involved because of the issues around due process and illegal extradition. Everything old is new again. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of Kentucky, the McCoys. They found the Hatfields guilty. 7 of them got life sentences, and an 8th, Ellis and Cotton Top Mounts, was hanged. He claimed that he pled guilty because he expected leniency, but he was really innocent. Never mind, thousands attended the hanging. Today, the location of the hanging is actually now the location of a class building at the University of Pikeville. The last words before he was hanged, "The Hatfields made me do it." Fighting eased after the trial of Johns for the New Year's Eve massacre. Johns got life. The McCoy family, I think this is really interesting, and this is where it becomes relevant to contemporary times. We'll get there. The McCoy family later was found with genetic testing to have a condition, a genetic condition called Hippel-Lindau disease, which causes the person with this genetic makeup to experience severe levels of anger and to be unable to control that anger. It's non-regulated at all. There's all sorts of cultural reference to the Hatfields and the McCoys. Shows, books, they feature in literature, movies. But the thing that amused me was in 1979, descendants of both families appeared on the TV show Family Feud. And they answered questions competitively for money and pig. And the money and the pig were on stage the entire time. The McCoys won, but the Hatfields got more money. So the McCoys got more points, but the Hatfields amassed more money. And very wisely, the TV show increased the amount of money that the McCoys got to within $1.05 of what the Hatfields got. In 1999, Hatfield and McCoy Historical Site Restoration was begun, and a CD was made of a driving tour of all the different death sites and battle sites. In the year 2000, there was a joint reunion with 5,000 descendants of both families together. On June 14th, 2003, they formed an official truce. The governor of Kentucky and the governor of West Virginia both signed proclamations declaring the truce to be valid and legal. And this is where we come to what I think is the most significant contemporary issue regarding this old feud. This was an old battle. This was ridiculous grudges based on revenge and greed, animosity, grudges held. And it was indicative of this Hippo-Lindau syndrome that fuels burning anger and resentment that is not regulated. Runs in the family, genetic testing. Guess who's related to the Hatfields and the Mccoys, both sides of the family? Well, I'll tell you who fired the first shot in this feud, theoretically. Asa was shot coming home from the Civil War by a guy called Jim Vance. And I looked this up, and yes, indeed, our Vice President, J.D. Vance, is related. He's a distant cousin to both sides of the family. And I don't know if anybody has ever asked him about his genetic makeup, but I will say this. His grandmother, Mama Vance, set his sleeping grandfather, her husband, on fire, poured gasoline on him and set him on fire because she was mad at him. And J.D. Vance bragged about it in his book, Hillbilly Elegy. You can look it up. Seems sofas, couches figure very prominently in their family genealogy. So I just thought I would tell this story because of the connection. You know, sometimes emotions that seem inexplicable actually do have a material explanation. And I have asked myself many times, why does that young man seem so angry? Why has he got a chip on his shoulder? What grudge is he holding? I guess we know. Thanks very much for watching. Slán go fóill. Sláinte.